Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining, everyone. We're so happy to see you, so happy that you're joining tonight. We're really excited for this panel to learn more about Princeton alumni volunteer leadership. We have a really distinguished panel tonight, and I'm going to let them do the introductions, introduce themselves, and let them tell you more about what they do for Princeton currently, and how they got involved and their memorable experiences. So with that, as you can see, we are recording this conversation, so you're welcome to stay visible or to turn off your cameras. And let's see, we will have Q&A. You can use the chat for Q&A and also plan to use the time to read through some of the questions that come in and ask the panelists. So with that, would love for the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us more about what you do. And we also have Grace Penn from the Office of the Alumni Engagement Team, who can offer up a little context in terms of what it means to get involved and be engaged at Princeton. So maybe before the panelists start, maybe Grace, if you can give us, 2 to 3 minutes of context setting.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Grace Penn, I'm class of 99, and I work on the alumni engagement team in our Office of Advancement. So before, we used to be called the Office of Alumni Affairs, and many of you may know us as that, which was separate from our development office. Still separate teams, but now reporting into the same line in the Office of Advancement. And so the Alumni Engagement Team is responsible for supporting various communities of alumni, helping them to strengthen connections with each other and with the university. And so we support mainly our alumni leaders of these communities and try to help them recruit new leadership, try to help them strengthen their processes. And these are like classes. These could be regional associations, affinity groups such as ABPA. We really try to work with them and help to support them in as much as we can to help them in return engage with their various constituencies. We also are responsible for putting on programming that brings alumni back to campus and programming around the country. So when we help to support President Eisgruber when he's out in the regions, we also are responsible for reunions, which many of you should know about, and the affinity conferences such as Thrive, which was in 2019. And so what we do is we put on that programming and we sort of work as a full team to do that. And then the different teams will work with various alumni leaders to help them engage their constituencies. And so different ways you can get involved. The alumni website really has a lot of opportunities for you to get involved either with your class or an affinity group that you might be interested in volunteering for, or a region. The regional associations many of them are quite vibrant, holding programming in the regions. And so the website is a good place to start. So that's basically what we do in a nutshell. And we are currently located both at McLean House, which is right next to Nassau Hall, and a new office building off campus called Overlook. If you go to the website, you can find lots of information on how to contact us, how to reach us. Alex Day is the new VP for Alumni Engagement, and she oversees all of this. So I hope I've answered the question, and I'm here to respond if you have any others.
Perfect. Thanks, Grace. That's very helpful context. So with that, we'll turn to the panelists. How about the order of Eric, Henri, Ita, and Laurence? In about 1 to 2 minutes, if you could tell us, a little bit about what you do during your day job, how you volunteer for Princeton currently, and what that entity does for Princeton.
Cool. So Eric Plummer, class of 2010, based in Bloomfield, New Jersey. I am currently a managing director of sales operations at Silicon Valley Bank, helping to lead our go-to-market strategy there. I also moonlight as a father, and I also moonlight as a volunteer across a couple of different groups. So ABPA as the president of the organization, Alumni Council as ABPA's representative, annual giving as ABPA's representative. I'm involved with the U Store as a trustee, and I think that's roughly it for the moment. There's probably something else somewhere in the universe that'll pop up during the conversation, but just excited to be able to engage and represent across these different organizations, and excited to share more.
I'm Henri Ford. I guess I'm the senior person on the panel, hanging out with a bunch of youngsters. So it's great. It's great that that Camille decided to reach out to the old folks. So from the class of 1980, I'm currently the Dean and Chief Academic Officer at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. So what does it all mean? Well, I'm a pediatric surgeon turned primarily into an administrator, but I'm still I still manage to get into the operating room periodically, and operating on little children is really a blessed privilege. So that's not something you ever want to give up for administration. So I have been involved with Princeton for quite some time. I think that people have had a love affair with that place. I know we'll get into the specifics, but certainly it's largely, well, it's played a pivotal role in where I am today without question. So the opportunity to give back has always been important to me, whether it was through alumni giving or participation in the Alumni Schools Committee. My wife and I always, whom I met in the class of 82, Donna Ford, we would always try to volunteer to interview candidates for Princeton. We always wanted to identify others who hopefully would have the benefit of attending Princeton and turning their lives around like it certainly did for us. In annual giving is something that I've always participated in. Again, even when I didn't have a whole lot to give, or when I've had a little bit more to give, I think it's an important thing to do because there are so many others who can benefit from it. I think it's probably in that context at some point somebody decided to nominate me for alumni trustee, and so that worked out great. And so I served as 4 years, and then I was invited to return as a charter trustee, where I've been doing that for 6 years now, 6 additional years. So it's a 10-year service record for now, and it's altogether it's a 12-year sentence to serve as a trustee. In my particular case, it's been an absolute privilege, and I've served on several important committees, and especially academic affairs, honorary degrees, board development, the executive committee, building and grounds, and so forth. So you get to see the university in so many different ways. And to be able to influence what happens is just an absolutely amazing privilege, considering that Karen Ali and I were reminiscing earlier. Look, we used to demonstrate outside the Nassau Hall all the time. So to be sitting in Nassau Hall and trying to impact the direction of the university, its trajectory, and especially how it deals with underrepresented minority students has been particularly meaningful to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Henri. Ita, you're on mute.
Great. Hi, everyone. Ita Ekpoudom, class of 03. Also drank the Kool-Aid from day one and have been really involved since graduation. I'm Nigerian, so I was just like trying not to fail out. So I didn't do anything leadership-wise until I joined Tigression sophomore year. And then, but after I graduated, I ran for and was treasurer of my class. So when we in the first 5 years, or was it first 10 years? I forget at this point. So I was treasurer, and then I was the finance chair for our 5th reunion. Then I was co-chair of our 10th reunion. And then post that, you know, MIBS reached out, and you never say no to MIBS. And I joined the Alumni Council Committee on Reunions. And then I ultimately became the chair of the Committee of Reunions. So I love reunions. I do a lot of reunions. And I served in that. And I thankfully, even though my successor did an amazing job, I got to do the last reunions before the pandemic. So I was the chair during the last in-person reunions. I've loved the virtual reunions, but I'm really excited and hopefully, you know, going back this year for back to in-person in May. And then I've been most recently was appointed as a member at large on the Alumni Council. And so that has been an interesting standpoint to just kind of see what's going on across the Alumni Council. But yeah, that's been my involvement. I also have done things with PWM here in New York. So, you know, all things Princeton, I tend to stay engaged. And I'm most excited because Alex Day was my part mom in Tigression. So I spent my first year with her singing in my ear. So I am such a proud part baby to see her in the position that she is today. So love all things being a part of the alumni engagement community.
I think that means me. I'm up. Excellent. So my name is Laurence Latimer. I'm a graduate alumnus from 2001 from the School of Public and International Affairs. In the day job, I'm a co-founder and CEO of a fintech startup called Dinara that is focused on providing enterprise financial services for the crypto economy. I've got a pretty long history of volunteering at Princeton, and so there's a number of roles that I currently serve in. On the alumni alumni engagement side, I'm the chair of the Dean for Research's Alumni Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I'm a member of the governing body for the Association of Princeton Graduate Alumni, and through that, I'm a member of the Alumni Council Executive Committee. On the fundraising side, on the annual giving side, or the advancement side, I guess I should say, I'm the vice chair for leadership gifts for graduate alumni annual giving. And for this call, a lot of you may know me as the co-chair for the Connect Initiative, which is the Black Alumni Annual Giving Initiative. And I do that with Lisa Washington from the grade class of '89. And I also serve as a member of the Campaign Executive Steering Committee for the Venture Forward campaign. So a number of roles that I currently hold for the university and kind of split between engagement and giving. And then outside of the work I do directly for the university, I'm also the co-founder and co-chair for Princeton Alumni Angels of Greater New York, which is an angel investment organization of Princeton alum. We've done since 2018 about a little over $10 million invested across 35 plus deals or so. So broad exposure, but most of my time spent on annual giving and at this point now leadership giving as well.
Thanks, Laurence. And with that, before jumping into the questions, can you all maybe give a little bit more color into what your respective organizations do? I've been involved in annual giving and have sought and now volunteering with ABPA and turned to Grace for help in figuring out like where could be a fit. But like, so what does annual giving do? What does ABPA do? What do the trustees do? What does the Alumni Council do? Really, I don't know what the Alumni Council does. And it sounds like you all, or several of you do Alumni Council. So concisely, maybe starting with Laurence on AG.
Yeah, well, on the annual giving side, the annual giving is one of the great sort of jewels that Princeton has. And it's the entity that solicits money from alumni, from parents, and from friends of the university on an annual basis. And all of that money is unrestricted and goes directly into supporting the most critical needs that the university has in that year. Like as an example, a couple of years ago, as COVID sort of jumped up, annual giving funds were used to help build out the testing center that made it possible to get students and professors back on campus and to do so safely. That wasn't a budgeted expense, and so millions of dollars had to come from somewhere, and that money came out of annual giving. In many, it's oftentimes looked at as the kind of VC dollars, like the earliest dollars to seed new opportunities at the university that ultimately go on to be self-sustaining and self-funding. And so that's what it is. It's in any given year on overall on the undergraduate side, there'll be around between 45 and 55% of the undergraduate student body that gives back to the university through annual giving. That is by far higher than any of our peer institutions. It was a couple of years ago, Dartmouth, which I think was at like 29 or 30%, called Princeton out in their own annual giving kind of summary that they sent to their alumni to say they were second only to Princeton in their participation rate for annual giving. So it just gives you a sense of how much, how special this institution is and the engagement that its alumni have back to the university. So that's what annual giving does, and it's primarily volunteer driven. It's very much about whether it's at the class level on the undergraduate side. What I do with Connect is kind of an overlay. So Lisa and I try to engage with the roughly 5,500 or so Black alumni, graduate alumni as well as undergraduate alumni across the university, and that's in collaboration with the classes. I also again used to serve as chair for 2 terms of graduate alumni annual giving, and there were 27,000 graduate alumni in any given year that I was charged with through an incredible volunteer base with touching and encouraging them to give back to the university. So yeah, AG is all about those incredibly high value dollars for the university, and are applied spent 100% in the year in which they're given, or the following year in which they're given, on the most important initiatives for the university.
Thanks, Laurence. Who wants to take the next? Maybe Ita on Alumni Council.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Alumni Council as the body that oversees all the different types of groups where alumni can be engaged, right? So if you think about if you think about what Princeton means to you, there's probably some type of affinity group or cause or community within the Princeton network that really resonated for you. So if you maybe with, Laurence is talking about alumni annual giving and advancement, if that was something that you really enjoyed and wanted to be a part of, you can get involved with that group. For ABPA, that's a group that was meaningful, PWN. So think of all the different types of groups that you as an alum might participate in. They get representation on the Alumni Council. So it's kind of like the leaders of those groups come together to be a part of I guess at this point, it's over 100,000 alumni. Once you matriculate, you count as an alumni, are part of the Alumni Association. And so from that standpoint, it's making sure that all of those alumni's voices can be heard and giving you opportunities to volunteer with it. And so it's really easy. All you have to do is actually reach out to like Grace's team, Alex's team. It's an inclusive community. So it's not like you have to run for an office to get involved with the Alumni Council. They're actively looking for alums who want to be engaged. And if there's a path within the Princeton network that you want to be more active in, tell them that, and they'll tell you what the options are. And so there's the Alumni Council, and then there's the Alumni Council Executive Committee, which are the actual leaders of each of those groups. And they come together about 4 times a year to have an overview and do learnings from across the different groups of what have your constituents been doing, what's going on in your regions, what's going on for your different committees. So that is bubbled up and given back to the Office of Engagement and Advancement, and they can kind of be the eyes and ears that kind of sums it all together. So for instance, when I was on there as the chair of reunions, right, I didn't actually, get to plan reunions, but you get to have input and you get to, help support this vast machine that the university does. And I think it's very unique the way Princeton does it, of inviting alums to come and be a part of it so that you can hear what the university is doing. And if there's something that, what I loved about getting to go to those meetings was that you got to hear both from the administration, you got to hear from students, you got to hear from professors. So you got to see all of the changes that are happening on campus that are long after we've gone, and stay a part of that. And then you can take that back and share to your community. So I would encourage anybody that is wanting to stay involved with Princeton, or if you feel disconnected or if you feel you can do more, the Alumni Council is a great way to start, and then go into a place that you really want to maybe end up chairing something or doing something in a leadership position. And I see Mary Newborn is on the call, and she is the current chair of the Alumni Council. So we have the leader of the leaders on the call tonight, which is great. So maybe at some point we can have Mary say a few words and tell us more about what is on the agenda for this year. So that's great.
Well, welcome. Fantastic. Nice to see you, Mary. Eric and Henri, if you want to tell more about, what do affinity groups do, and what does the Board of Trustees do?
Cool. I will do ABPA and affinity groups first, and then I'll let the Board of Trustees go last, because that's a little more important than in all the rest of the structures in some way. But no, so ABPA really centered around how do you create opportunities for connection between Black alums and each other, between Black alums in the broader Princeton community, between Black alums in the broader alumni community, right? How do you really think about that integration? Really started 1972, so 50th anniversary this year. So it's the oldest of all the affinity groups, and really started because it wasn't a space that felt like home for Black alums. Similar to even how the Third World Center and its predecessors kind of existed, right? There were spaces where you could be safe to be yourself. You could be safe to be around people that looked like you, even if one could argue weren't exactly like you in every single possible way. And it was really a safe space. And I think ABPA really started off as that. And I think as it's evolved over the years, has really gotten into a bunch of different programming and advocacy and opportunities to really help drive conversations forward. But at its core, it's really about how do you create that connective tissue that allows us to be, or Black alums to be a thriving community within the broader Princeton alumni community.
All right, so the Board of Trustees is really the body that's responsible for overseeing the entire university. Its fiduciary responsibilities to ensure the vitality of Princeton, both in the present as well as in the future, to make sure it's going to be there for at least another 100 years, and that it will remain a dominant force in higher education, and that the values that the university embraces really reflect our collective view about where society should be headed, and live up to the motto that Princeton is in the nation's service and in the service of humanity. So how do we do that? So we have a number of different committees. I alluded to some of them before, that look at different components of what makes Princeton the school that it is. The academic affairs, you have student life, you have finance committee, obviously, which is extremely important. The investment committee, you have the audit committee, again, to make sure that everything is happening in the proper manner, and that the school remains financially quite viable, and that the endowment is properly managed. And what we do is to help set the priorities with the administration, but we don't really micromanage the administration. So the president is hired by the board and is empowered to carry out the functions that have been delegated to him and his administrative body to ensure the vitality of the institution. So all of our work is really through empowering the president to look at the best interests of the university, and we come together about 4 or 5 times a year on campus to review how the various committees, the various aspects of Princeton are doing. And public, we also have the public affairs, we have all sorts of aspects that are being monitored on a regular basis, and we work very closely with the administration. And what's really unique about the Board of Trustees at Princeton is it is not an intrusive board. We recognize that we need to function at the governance level, which means we're being more generational, trying to say what is the trajectory for Princeton? Where should we be? Not just today, but 10, 20 years from now. What new programs should we help support? And how do we use our resources to accomplish different aims? For instance, a focus in recent years was to make sure we had more fly students, first generation to college, low income student coming to Princeton, and make sure that it's affordable. So there's a bunch of different things that we look at. Then we had separate committees to look at how to name buildings and so forth. And so we take this responsibility very seriously. Because we want to make sure that the university really remains at the forefront of the top universities in the country.
Perfect. Really appreciate the overview. I definitely have seen many of you at lots of events, certainly on Alumni Day, and had no idea, what your respective roles were. So this was a helpful overview for me, but want to turn more to understand about how you were able to navigate, and how you were able to become a leader in alumni affairs in these different roles. So I guess, can you share a little bit more about, maybe how you decided to focus on a specific area, and then, what, were the steps that were involved in becoming a leader?
Yeah, I can actually kick off there. Probably the least intentional of the collective group here. I literally just moved to Detroit, Michigan. I had a bunch of free time before I had kids and got married, and was like, I should probably get involved. I had been doing like alumni interviewing throughout the years, thought that was really fun. And a friend reached out because somebody reached out to them about joining the ABPA board. They were like, I'm too busy to do it. Would you be interested in learning more? I learned more, hopped on a couple of calls, and really just joined the board from there. And then kind of throughout time, really began to realize that, one, as like a startup operator in a past life, I like building structure and process. And there was a lot of opportunity to do that here, and kind of just stuck around, right? And took on doing our unions event, took on doing our like regular programming, took on doing our finances and building our like organizational structure. And transparently was just one of those things that kind of evolved, right? There was no like deep intentionality. It was fun. It was serving a good purpose. And for me as a kid who was lucky enough to grow up with an uncle who went to Princeton and my father went to Princeton, like it always kind of felt like home. And I felt like it was the least that I could do was give a little bit of time to make it feel like home for the next generation of alumni. So no like deep intentionality, no like master plan. Still kind of just going with the flow, and just happened to be here with the chance to serve in a thoughtful way.
How do you become president?
Fall forward each time. No, I mean, I think the short answer, right, is when you're in any organization, right, any group that you're in, people always look for individuals who are willing to like take on tasks. And when they take them on, they not only just say they're going to do them, but actually execute against them, right? Like that's really the high bar for volunteering, right? Like I think Henri said it really well. Like it's the trustees take their responsibility very seriously, right? Like if you say you're gonna do something, you deliver, right? Because you're delivering not just for yourself and like your brand, but you're delivering for the greater community. And for me, that was just how I always accepted every task that I did. And that's the X, right? And when you get to the point where you can't do it, it's volunteer. Like raise your hand and just say like, hey, like I've hit my capacity constraints. And like Laurence and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, I'm doing 8 things. Maybe I should just do 4 things, right? So I can actually focus on the startup I'm doing, right? It's a balancing act, and it always changes and evolves, but just be honest. And when you can take more, take it. And when you can take less, like be thoughtful about finding people to actually help share the load, right? There are 100,000 of us. There's somebody else in the universe that could also jump in and be a support system here as well.
Yeah, I actually just want to add on to that. A couple of things I think are important is that this panel is filled with people that do a lot, right? That's not expected, nor is it normal, right? There's a reason why, we've been invited here because we do a lot. And so, but just do one thing, right? Just do one thing. Do ASC, Alumni Schools Committee, interview kids. There's one time a year that you got to do something with ASC. Become part of your regional association, right? Just go to 2 things a year for that, right? The volunteering back to university doesn't have to be a big commitment. It can. The university does an incredible job at meeting you where you're at, and there are opportunities, whatever you're interested in, whether you want to lead something, whether you want to be a follower, just participate, whatever it is, there's an opportunity for you to go do this. I do want to just make that point. And then the other is just to capitalize. There literally was a point where there were like 8 things that I was doing for the university. I didn't even realize it because you get backed into this stuff, right? If you are, as another entrepreneur, you just kind of do and do and do. And like most things in life, if you're do stuff, you're going to get asked to do more stuff. And so it is important to know your thresholds and when to push your hand up to say, you know what, that's not great right now. Maybe it'll work in a year or 2 when I roll off of whatever it is that I'm working on now. But I think it's important for your own sanity and not to burn out, frankly, on Princeton, because or anything else, right? It's real easy to burn out if you're doing too much. So really just like meter that involvement, but do something. That's the one thing I would say, whatever it is, do something for the university. I'm a huge just believer in wherever we derive value from, it's incumbent upon us to then contribute that much value back to the thing and sort of grow it for the next generation. And I know that my life, career and personal, would change dramatically from my time at the university. And so I frankly take great pleasure in giving back as much as I can, my time, treasure, and talents back to university to help other people, like me, wherever they may come from, have this transformative experience.
I would completely agree with both of those sentiments. As I said, I didn't do any kind of class leadership things until towards the end of my time at the university. Immigrant style. My parents were not wanting me to not get out of this place of what I came to. But I had been president of my class for all 4 years in high school, and I enjoyed being engaged with class activities. And so when we were graduating, our class, all classes have that strong class affinity, but I felt a very strong affinity for my class. And so I was like, okay, we're leaving. I'm going to miss this place. I like doing things around bringing people together. And so that's when I decided to run for treasurer, like when we were graduating. And so that was the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to run for something. And once you get involved and start doing things, exactly like, Eric and Laurence said, that you just keep getting more things. And so, it graduated from being, okay, I work in finance, so I'll be the finance chair of our reunion. And then from there, it was like, oh, well, you guys did such a great job making sure we did the reunions on time, on budget. Why don't you be co-chair of the 10th? And so I was like, okay, I can do that. And so when I finished that, I was like, oh, I'm done. And then you get the call of like, well, did you know there's this thing called the Alumni Council? There's a whole committee on reunions. You can join that. And so the interest that you have, they just find a thread that's like, oh, well, that sounds cool. I want to do that. And then you join that committee. And then next thing, would you like to be chair of that committee? Well, that sounds great. And so those kinds of things, just opportunities to keep staying involved. And the reason you stay involved is because you get to see that overview of what's going on in a way that even if you just come to 1 or 2 things, you don't get to see. So that keeps you engaged. But I do agree that at a certain point, you have to think about all the different things you do. And for me, post that chair, I didn't say I'm a partner at a venture capital firm. And, a lot of stuff was revving up. And so for me, it came a point where I was like, I need to step back a little bit. I want to be involved, but I can't be on a committee or chair a committee. But I still ended up doing things like Thrive, but because they're just so interesting and they add back to your personal and professional life. So I think that's one of the things is like, don't take on something you don't want to do, but if you take it on, there's a way where it's not in detracting, it can be additive to what you're doing. So that's why I would also say pick something that is additive to what you care about. People say, oh, you do a lot of stuff for Princeton, or you do, but I was like, when you look at what I do things around women, I do things around Black people, I do things around the investing ecosystem. It's kind of things that feed into the things that I'm doing when I'm not at Princeton. So it makes it a pleasure and a joy to give my time to that.
Thanks, Ita.
Yeah, very hard to add anything to what's already been said. I think Laura said it well. You just have to get involved with something. You have to do something and be committed to doing it. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. And certainly, I said that was that's my history. I think I didn't come back to Princeton until about my 10th year after my 10th reunion. I was busy trying to get through med school and residency and fellowship, and it takes forever. But once I was able to get back on campus and go back to the Third World Center and reconnect with everyone else, it was just magical. And this is a place that for so many of us, even those of us who may have felt that we were not really fully supported during the time we were there and so on and so forth, it's undeniable what we've been able to gain out of being there. And the Princeton difference is not something that we experience just by being in the classroom, but it's the community that we develop. It's all the other people that we get to meet with, interact with, and who remain, lifelong friends and significant others in our lives. So yeah, it's whatever we can do to give back. Let's do that. And wife and I were telling to our son, who just graduated in 17, say, hey, you need to start giving into something to alumni giving. You should need to do something. I don't care why do I have to give? They say, hey, you need to do something and start now. You don't have to give a whole lot, but just start small. And it's all cumulative, and they keep track of that. So when they ultimately need someone to serve on some committees, trust me, Alumni Council and the board, they look at the track record of your commitment to Princeton. So I strongly encourage you to do something, anything. It doesn't have to be a whole lot.
Okay. No, this is good. I feel like we have a great mix. So interesting to hear you say that you got involved 10 years at your 10th reunion, and Ita, you started getting involved right when you finished. So a nice mix, but I think a lot of the messages are similar. With that in mind, I'm curious to know, did you face any culture shock or any imposter syndrome as you navigated into some of these leadership roles? I feel like you can end up in some fascinating, interesting rooms that you maybe never knew existed when you pursue these roles. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
I'm happy to start that one. I had all kind of things like strikes against me going into leadership roles. I was a graduate alumnus, a Black alumnus. It was a very different experience that I've had along my journey. And I remember that when the sort of first real big opportunity, I think, I was chair grad AG, and I kind of figured that out, and it took a year or two to figure that out. But it was Tim Kingston who asked me to serve as vice chair on the National Annual Giving Committee. And it was the first grad alum to serve as the vice chair. And like all this stuff opened up, and I felt like I've been looking into a room through the peephole, and all of a sudden a door opened up. I had no idea, like the culture of this place and the way in which sort of power structures move in this place. It is like incredibly complicated. It is entirely unwritten, and you learn it entirely by the experience of going through it. It is both a great honor and sort of one of the things that binds this place together. It is incredibly frustrating if as you're trying to sort of learn what's happening there. I would say in terms of the culture shocks, there was a knowledge gap that I think was really big. I think it was unique to my story, but it would be unique to anyone who isn't deeply involved, who's getting more involved. I'd say there was a culture shock. It was frankly probably more on the grad side, like being a graduate alumnus and dealing with a university that's really oriented around undergrads. That was the more had a bigger friction point for me than it was being sort of Black. You had folks like Jim Simmons who had been there before, and folks like, like Brent is the godfather, right? So he had sort of, and Dennis, Brownlee, like these guys had blazed a lot of trails earlier. So I think there was a bit more sensitivity to the concerns of Black alumni. And there was space, with Wheezy prior to Tim, and then Tim, there was real space there to sort of do some new and interesting things in terms of AG on AG for Black alumni, the Connect initiative. But it was really fascinating to see how people interacted when I ever said anything about graduate alumni. They were like, the head just tilted to the side and was like, oh, well, I don't know, what do you guys do? And so you went from speaking for 5,500 Black alumni to speaking for 27,000 graduate alumni in the room. So I think most of us in our careers are oftentimes the only person of color in the room, the only woman in the room, what have you. So it wasn't that dissimilar from there, but it was an incredible learning experience. And I'd say if you do wind up getting involved in leadership roles, it typically takes about a year to figure it out before you really have an ability to influence in a really meaningful way.
Thanks, Laurence.
Yeah, I would say probably in short, similar to kind of Lawrence's point, most of the rooms that I go in every single day aren't people that look like me. But I think it's even interesting. Like I was sitting here thinking about like Laurence and Henri and Ita and their experiences, right? You have a venture capitalist, a crypto entrepreneur, and a pediatric surgeon. Like I'm not even adequate in the room that I'm sitting in currently in my own house right now on this panel, right? So it's a lot of, you get in these rooms and I think these conversations, it's natural to feel like you're not good enough or like you don't fit. If Princeton taught me anything, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about whether I fit or not in the room. It's about how you feel about you fitting in the room and like what you can contribute. And I think it's super important just to really, when you lean into volunteer, like it's not about like credentials. It's about like, are you willing to be committed and to really drive something forward intentionally? I think like Lauren said, there have been a lot of trails that have been blazed. And if we were having this conversation 40 years ago, it would probably be a very different tone of what inclusivity looked like. I think the university is taking a very conscious stance on making a lot of the spaces more inclusive. I think it's now up to individuals, right, alumni, to really step in and to take ownership of roles that they find interesting and that excite them, regardless of what your professional background is and regardless of where you are in life. If you have the time, it's open to you and open to all of us.
No, that's great, Eric. Thank you. Ita and Henri?
Sure. It's interesting. I think the hardest part was probably the first year, like just being on campus the first year and just getting acclimated. But I have to say, I don't know, maybe part of the reason I love Princeton so much is that even from the time I got admitted and I came for admit weekend, they every touch point when the university does something, they do it so well. Because I was convinced I was going to Stanford. Like that was my dream school. When I got in, I was like, yes, it's happening. And I went to visit for admit weekend there, and it just felt overwhelming. I felt lost. I felt like a teeny tiny thing in a place. And then I came to Princeton's admit weekend, and it was like being welcomed into a little bubble, because we are that little bubble that we sit in on that beautiful campus. And the way we were hosted and the way friends that I made at that weekend are still friends today. So I think it was just the way that first impression happened for me, built a connection. And then I think when I joined Tigressions, you find your tribe within that moment. And for me, it became Tigressions. And I think about it to this day, my class that I entered with, the class of 2000, are still my two best friends today. We still live in the city and I talk to them every day. And like when I went into venture capital, my friend's husband started one of the top VCs in New York. I was able to call him and be like, give me the one-on-one of how it is to build a venture capital firm and what I should think about going into this. And then my other best friend, she is now the COO of investment banking at Goldman, and we both work together. So it's like these two women I've known since we were 19, 18, and you get to grow. And so feeling that ability of when you're just teenagers and you're just regular people, you've done nothing, you find that moment where you feel confidence together, you can then grow. And so I felt a confidence within my class. I felt an affinity for my class. And that's what I wanted to stay onto. And that opened a lot of doors because your classmates go on and do all kinds of interesting things. And I mean, I did go into investment banking. So I went into spaces where banking and trading, I was the only Black woman on our trading desk, but you get used to that. You realize that when you have a difficult to spell name, you have you look different, people will remember you. And so when you keep showing up, they remember you. And then if you do things and you do them well, they ask you to come back. So I think the imposter syndrome goes away when you realize that you do add value and that what you say actually can mean and do meaningful things, and that the university values that and wants you to do more of it. So I think that's how I got over from the initial, was finding a place for me and then growing with the people around me, which has been really wonderful to see. And so that's why I would say, back to Laurence's point, find that one thing about Princeton you cared about. There is a space for you on this campus to turn that into something meaningful that will help a lot of alums and undergrads too.
Thank you, Ita.
So imposter syndrome. Well, I think the last time I suffered from that disease was freshman week, when this Haitian kid from Brooklyn ended up in this campus, and I rode the bus and the train, and then I show up and everyone's got fancy cars and all sorts of things, and then I say, "Why I don't belong here?" And I think that's probably where I felt least, I guess, worthy of being there, and said I was completely out of place. But this is where the community really rallied around me, and then I saw, Black folks, underrepresented minorities doing great things, and then I had my inspiration, people like Randall Kennedy, Pine Prize, Rhodes Scholar. I said, hey, I belong. I can do this too. And my role model, another role model, Gary Gibbons, there's a Randy Kennedy, now professor of law at Harvard, Gary Gibbons, director of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. I mean, these were the people. I mean, and so many others doing amazing things. I said, I belong as much as anybody else. As much as the rich folks, as much as the, people with different complexion, it didn't even matter anymore. And once I got over that disease, that I knew that I belonged at Princeton, and I just never looked back. And when I sit in the boardroom with everyone else, my word is that's important. And maybe I even I've traveled a different course, it come from a completely different background, so we have so much more to offer, and we never shy away from offering our thought, and then try to do it in the most constructive manner. So this imposter syndrome, done.
Love it. Love it. I feel like very powerful words from all of you. Thank you. I have one or two more questions. We are running low on time. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'm curious, as you pursued these leadership roles, or as you became leaders in the alumni volunteer space, how much is it about putting your hand up versus getting tapped?
I think it starts the way, I think for all of us, we just did one kind of volunteer thing, right? I ran to be a class officer, but it was one of those kind of things where you can be an officer and then you can roll off. Like there are people that did it and then they're like, I'm good, I'm gone. And then when that term ends, you can end up saying, oh, usually they're looking for somebody in some of these things, and like they're looking for people that want to put in a little bit more time. And so, you raise your hand. Oh, do you want to be co-chair? Okay. And then with the going on to the Alumni Council, I thought I was done. I thought I was like going to roll off and just start going to reunions like everybody else. But because I'd been really actively involved, that's when they reached out and asked, would you be interested in volunteering on the committee on reunions? And to me, that was like a logical extension of something I'd enjoyed doing that would give me a new purview into it. So it started out as just being a regular volunteer, and then showing up, doing a good job, and then, you know, having your classmates or whichever organization you're being a part of view you as somebody that did a good job, that brought people along. And then I think sometimes the university then sees that and reaches out. But it all starts with showing up and doing, you know, a few things that you show and being committed to.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've seen it happen both ways, right? I've seen people who actively weren't engaged, and they were a friend of somebody who was engaged. That person reaches out, taps them on the shoulder, and is like, come on, try this one thing with me real quick. They get hooked and never leave. And I've seen people similar to Ita, where it's like, I was just doing one thing and I was going to mind my business when I was done. And next thing you know, you look back in 20, 25, 30 years later, you're still involved and still having conversations. I mean, it's as simple as like picking up a ASC interview for like incoming students. It's as easy as giving $25 a year to annual giving. So this is similar to what like Dr. Ford was talking about. Like, you can find tons of ways to get involved and to show that you're interested. But like, once the snowball starts, like Laurence mentioned, it's an active pursuit to stop the snowball from rolling. It will continue to roll, and it will continue to pick up all snow and debris in its path as it goes through. But it's about knowing where your boundaries are and like what you are willing to do and like where and like what time you have to commit. Because I think the worst thing for everybody, right, is to start a commitment that you can't finish. It doesn't make you feel good. It doesn't make the people you're working with feel good. But as long as you're honest about that stuff, it happens organically. But once it happens, it really does become a part of just who you are and how you engage with the university.
So, again, if you're there and you're doing good things, you're going to be noticed. I see my classmate Dwayne McQueen is there and is on the call, and you know, he's one of those people who was very active at Princeton. Well, he was very active in the Alumni Schools Committee, and then also, you know, that's someone they always looked up to help organize things when I lived in LA and he was in LA, or he's still there. And there were other colleagues who were involved in the Princeton Prize. You know, so there are a bunch of different things you can really do. And in addition to interviewing, I mean, just the breadth of opportunities to engage in a meaningful way, and be a role model, which, you know, I know deep down we all want to do that and inspire others, and, you know, and just to be visible in your community and to represent Princeton and inspire others to say, hey, this is what this education afforded me, and you too deserve, you too can get access to it. I think it's important. I mean, I think it's important, even if I won't dwell on it.
Okay,
You get the message.
I've got nothing to add to that. Everybody just said it so eloquently. So.
Okay, thanks, Laurence. I see one question has come in on the chat, so I'll take that and then probably move to closing remarks. So where do you think the recent push to have DEI coordinators in various alumni groups fit within the organizational mission as advisors or as initiators? I'm not familiar with the context or background of this question, so if anybody is familiar, please feel free to take it.
Yeah, so at least from my standpoint, I've seen it happen quite a bit with the regional associations, right? Like trying to, so I think at least what I've seen historically, what's happened a lot is a lot of the regional associations tend to be a bit older and tend to be a little bit like less diverse, especially depending on where you are. Mostly because the regional association started, like I have this like old bric-a-brac book from like 1929 that somebody found and handed to me. And you go back through this book and they were all actually centered around schools, and mostly privileged schools in communities. So there's this kind of this long history of like these organizations kind of evolved over the years as like other structures. Like as you kind of think about like how they've evolved now into very regional focused and how they evolved into like more communities locally. What I've seen is, right, there's a desire to really create a diverse group that's representative of Princeton's community now, right? Not what Princeton's community used to be. And I think there's an active effort to really find people who are excited and willing to help bring others like them and not like them along for this journey, right? I think it's kind of probably in some ways not dissimilar to a lot of large corporations, where when you begin to realize that like you don't have diversity, you hire a head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It thought to hopefully thoughtfully bring you along on like a longer journey to really have a thoughtful conversation. I think here it's really an opportunity to thoughtfully and more deeply engage with diverse communities when you don't start off as innately diverse at the beginning. I think the alumni bases in all these places are pretty diverse. I mean, maybe sounds like Alaska. Like I don't know a lot of Black people in Alaska, but like maybe there's a ton of us there. But I think
there's oil. Like, there's Nigerians. We are everywhere. There's oil.
but I think it's a really awesome opportunity just to really be thoughtful about bringing everybody along for the journey in an intentional way.
Thanks, Eric. And okay, some clarification from Yina, thank you, in the chat. So I'm just curious, like, what have you enjoyed the most about being an alumni volunteer? And, you know, what are maybe some of the downsides of pursuing a leadership role as we move into the closing comments?
Yeah, I'll sort of start. I think the only downside is just having to rein in you know, my own involvement. I think I got a little over my skis at some point because it's all fun, it's all exciting, it's all, you know, in my case, I was meeting a lot of new people, which I love to do. You're engaging with people that you really enjoy being around. And at some point, you know, my wife is like, yo, dude, that's like 18 days you spent down at Princeton this year. You spend more time at Princeton you have on vacation with the family. We need to readjust a little bit. You kind of take stock and realize we've done a little bit much. So for me, that was the downside, you know, having to just pull back. And, you know, in my case, I took it emotionally. Like you kind of felt like you were letting down some folks. But, you know, the upside, I think, is far outweighs any downside of like overcommitting or things like that. I think, you know, Eric talked about just managing your own time. I hit on that. And as long as you're really thoughtful and intentional about what you can do and where your boundaries are, you'll be fine. But the upside is just, I mean, like a bunch of people, like Eric and I, entirely connected to volunteering at Princeton. He and I have entirely connected to volunteering. Like there's so many people who are now a part of the fabric of my life that I've met through volunteering back at the university. Just to add, like I didn't start doing anything until my 10th anniversary as a grad student. So yeah, I'm another one that didn't kind of start out this way, but kind of fell in, did a little something and came through. So there's the friends and the networks that you build through here are just incredibly valuable personally and professionally.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think getting to go to things like She Roars, and you know, I think when I went to the very first one, I was one of my only friends that went, and it just blew my mind how amazing it was. And seeing some of the women that came that have never come back because to them reunions is not something that feels welcoming, and they came for She Roars, and for them to see the university today, it got them back involved. So I love the way the university is trying to have things like, obviously reunions is a thing that we're all a part of, invited to, but depending on what your Princeton experience was like, reunions doesn't necessarily engender warmth or a happy thought. So I think me as a Black woman being the chair of reunions puts a different face on that. I think what they've done with She Roars, what we've done with Thrive, what we've done with all of the different other things of the touch points that the university is trying to do is the university showing that Princeton today, our Princeton is Princeton too. So it's not an other than, or we are Princeton too, and our experiences matter and count. and our voices are welcome. So I think those opportunities of seeing it on display and then seeing the behind the scenes is one of the coolest parts, is seeing the behind the scenes and seeing the 50-year plan and all of these kind of things of how far in advance they are thinking is, I think, one of the coolest things. And yeah, it's the same thing. The downside is you want to do it all. Like, you want to just always say yes, but then you have to recognize you're like, no, I do have a job. I'm supposed to be funding, like, so it's those other things. But like, the fact that you want to say yes all the time means that they're doing it right.
So I would say serving on the Board of Trustees is probably one of the most fulfilling and gratifying experiences of my life, and one that I do gladly, joyfully, even though it's, as you heard from Laurence, it's a significant time commitment. But there is so much inner good that comes from being able to, first of all, sit with an exceptionally talented group of people who are so accomplished. But we all share one common goal, which is to help usher Princeton into the pantheon of greatest universities on earth. But at the same time, coming in with the lens of, I want to make sure that the Princeton experience is also accessible to people from similar backgrounds that I came from. The kids from the inner city who had to, if it weren't for a full scholarship to Princeton, I just would not be sitting where I am right now. So it opened doors, and I just want to make sure that it continues to open doors for those who are less fortunate. Remember, it's not that people don't really care, but if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. The people are just going to be moving. They look at everything through the filters from that reflects their own experiences. So that's why it's important for us to be physically present, to be visible, and to be forceful, of course, without being obnoxious, to make sure that Princeton continues to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's the only way we can continue to work for that more perfect union. And of course, I don't need to tell anybody here that these are some scary times. So more than ever, we need to make sure that all of our voices are being heard.
Honestly, not much more to add. Downside, 24 hours in a day. Upside is all these relationships you get to build, right? Like it's about the people, and I think whether it's helping to open up reunions to more people that wouldn't have accessed it, whether it's about, like, for Laurence, like really navigating, like being a grad alum and getting into like the general alumni body in a thoughtful way, like Henri's point of like helping people like him, right? It's about people, right? That's why it's exciting, that's why it's interesting. If it wasn't for the humanity in all of this, it would not have the same feel, right? It's not the 275 years of like Princeton history that has all kinds of checkered past in it that makes it exciting. It's the 275 years of future that we get to drive forward to intentionally, and the people you get to drive forward with. So to me, that's what makes it exciting. But yet again, 24 hours in a day, I try to sleep like 6 of them. I try to like go to work for at least 8, 9, 10 of them, depending on the day. I'm like a dad sometimes. Like, you try to find time when you can, and it's challenging, but I think it's also super fulfilling. So that's why I leave this conversation.
This is great. Great remarks from all of you. I feel so inspired. I want to go do more. I'm going to call Grace again and figure out new ways to get involved. But on that note, just wanted to quickly give Mary an opportunity, if you have 1 or 2 minutes to share something, and Grace, if you have any, parting actionable thoughts for us or for those who are on the call and who want to, who are inspired. Give you some time too.
Oh my goodness, I'm so honored to be here. This has been a phenomenal event. I don't know that I have much to add, but really quickly, I'm Mary Newbern, class of '97, chair of the Alumni Council, which is literally for me an honor of a lifetime. To work in this capacity in the Alumni Council, Ita said it so beautifully. really seeks to engage alumni in the life of the university and with each other. And just like Eric said, there's a real humanity to the alumni journey. It's what makes it so meaningful. Laurence and I were direct messaging, talking about the amazing tigers that we've encountered in our alumni journey. And for me, the real meaning in all of this is just the lifelong learning and the relationships and the personal benefit. And it doesn't matter how many hours I put in, so much more comes back. So I would just want to add one thing, that one of the things that I often encounter is people when they hear about my involvement with the university, they're apologetic that they are not doing more. And literally, as Henri said, you don't have to be super involved. You can just find an hour here or an hour there. And the meaning and the benefit that you'll derive is just incredible. So we hope more than anything on the Alumni Council to create an open and welcome invitation to join us in some aspect of this incredible alumni journey. And thank you so much. It's been great to be here.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for joining tonight. Grace, any final recommendations for folks who are, now want to give an hour or now want to, become an alumni leader volunteer?
Yeah, I would say, as everyone has said, start small, find what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about young people, get involved in schools committee, interview people. If you're passionate about, say Black alumni, then contact Eric and see if there are ways you can volunteer there. Eventually join the board. It's a progression. And it's all about what you're passionate about. If you want to get involved with your class, they always need people to be class officers, to be peerage chairs, to be reunions planners. There are lots of benefits, and not to be sort of, a little bit of base, but we feed you, we will pay for you to come back to campus in some respects. The leaders of the Alumni Council, they get to come back 3 times a year, and they get really exclusive access to President Eisgruber, to administrators, to plans around the campus. So there's that. If you're, a leader of a affinity group, we often plan, strategy sessions on campus for you. There are lots of benefits. You get swag, but it's just start small, figure out what you're passionate about, go to the website, see who you need to call, and then just get started. And from there, it will progress.
Perfect. Thank you, Grace. I'll do a last call if anybody else wants to say anything.
Just want to acknowledge the magnificent job that our moderator has done this evening.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I enjoyed this conversation tremendously. I learned a lot. I think I have more understanding of what the Alumni Council does, and I'm going to keep on looking at the website. And I hope you all learned a lot and are trying to think of ways to get involved. So with that, thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for attending tonight.
Let the record show I'm wearing my ABPA pin.
Love it.
Excellent.
Yeah, Eric, I said I would put that plug in for make sure everybody pays their dues.